Fort Saint Elmo, 200 yards across, about 2 football fields. That's it. 450 defenders. The Ottoman Empire said it would fall in 5 days. Day 1, 60 cannons opened fire. 10,000 cannonballs. The walls began to crumble. Day 5, the Ottomans prepared to storm the ruins. They expected surrender. Instead, the knights loaded their guns. Day 10, 2,000 Ottomans dead. Fort still standing. Day 15, 4,000 Ottomans dead. Fort still standing. Day 20, 6,000 Ottomans dead. Fort still standing. Day 31, 8,000 Ottomans dead, including Dragut, the greatest Ottoman admiral in history. The fort the Ottomans said would fall in 5 days, held for 31. And only then, after every single defender was dead, did Fort Saint Elmo fall. Every defender died, but they took 8,000 enemies with them. This is the story of the bloodiest month of the 16th century. This is how 450 men broke an empire. May 25th, 1565. Dawn. The Ottoman bombardment of Fort Saint Elmo had begun, and it would not stop for 31 days. The pattern was the same every single day. 4 in the morning, the Ottoman cannons opened fire. 60 guns, firing constantly. The sound was like continuous thunder. The walls shook, limestone exploded, dust filled the air. By midday, Ottoman infantry would assault, Janissaries screaming, "Allahu Akbar," as they charged the breaches. The defenders would meet them with arquebus fire, with swords, with pikes, with anything they had. By dusk, the cannons would pause, and in the brief silence, the defenders would crawl out of their holes and rebuild the walls, using rubble, using broken stones, using the bodies of dead Ottomans as fill. They'd work all night, sleep for 2, maybe 3 hours, and at 4 in the morning, it would start again. 60 cannons, every day, for 31 days. By the end of the siege, 60,000 cannonballs would hit Fort Saint Elmo. Think about that. Fort Saint Elmo is 200 yards wide. That's 300 cannonballs per yard of fort. Every inch of that fortress was hit, pulverized, turned to dust. The walls were reduced to rubble within the first week. Inside the fort, conditions were hell. It was June in Malta. Temperatures climbed to 95, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The knights wore full armor, chainmail, steel plates. In that heat, men collapsed from exhaustion before the Ottomans ever reached them. There was no shade. Every building in the fort had been destroyed by cannon fire. The defenders huddled in whatever holes they could find. Rubble piles, collapsed cellars, anywhere to escape the sun and the cannonballs. Water was rationed to 1 cup per day. Food was running low. The wounded were everywhere, lying in the sun, screaming, dying slowly because there were no doctors, no medicine, no supplies. And every day, more men died. May 25th through 28th, 50 defenders killed. May 29th through June 3rd, 70 more dead. June 4th through 8th, 80 more dead. After just 2 weeks, 200 men were dead, out of 450. But here's the thing. Every Ottoman assault, 50 to 100 attackers dead, minimum. The Ottomans were losing at a 10-to-1 ratio. For every Christian who died, 10 Ottomans died. After 2 weeks, Ottoman casualties were around 2,000 dead, and the fort was still standing. Why? How were they holding? 4 reasons. First, the Star Fort design. Fort Saint Elmo was built using the latest military architecture. Angled walls, overlapping fields of fire, no dead zones. Every attacker was exposed to fire from multiple directions. It was a killing ground by design. Second, the Ravelin, a triangular defensive outwork in front of the main walls. It forced the Ottomans into a narrow approach, funneling them into a choke point where the defenders could slaughter them from elevated positions. Third, desperation. The defenders knew they were dead either way. If they surrendered, the Ottomans would execute them. If they fought, they'd die fighting. So they chose to die fighting. And if you're going to die anyway, you might as well take as many enemies with you as possible. And fourth, faith. These men genuinely believed that dying in defense of Christendom would send them to paradise. They weren't afraid of death. They were afraid of failing God. And that made them the most dangerous warriors the Ottomans had ever faced. But there was a problem. Fort Saint Elmo was isolated. It sat on a peninsula, separated from the main fortress of St. Angelo by 400 yards of water, the Grand Harbour. If the defenders needed to communicate with Jean de la Valette, if they needed supplies, if they needed reinforcements, there was only one way. They had to swim 400 yards, in the dark, with Ottoman patrol boats hunting for them. Every night, knights would volunteer. They'd strip to their underclothes, tuck a waterproof pouch with letters into their belts, whisper a prayer, and slip into the black water. They had to swim slowly. Splashing meant death. The Ottoman galleys were patrolling, listening. If the moon was out, they'd be spotted, shot, killed instantly. 400 yards, in darkness, takes 15 to 20 minutes to swim that distance. What did they carry? From St. Elmo to St. Angelo, casualty reports, supply requests, morale updates, desperate pleas for help. From St. Angelo to St. Elmo, encouragement from de la Valette, tactical advice, small amounts of gunpowder, religious relics, rosaries, pieces of the true cross, things to keep the defenders' faith strong. Some of the messengers were caught. Their bodies were found floating the next morning. The Ottomans would display the corpses as a warning, but the messengers kept volunteering. One night, a knight named Chevalier Lacerda stepped forward. He was 19 years old. He dove into the water, made it halfway across. And then the patrol boats spotted him. They killed him in the water. His body was found the next morning, floating face down in the Grand Harbour. But his waterproof pouch, still sealed, was recovered days later. Inside was a letter to his mother. It said, "Tell her I died well." The next night, another volunteer stepped forward. They always did. This is what the defense of St. Elmo looked like. This is what holding the line meant. Not glory, not heroism in the way we imagine it, just exhaustion, heat, thirst, pain, and death, day after day after day. But they held. For 2 weeks, they held. And the Ottomans started to panic. June the 2nd, 1565, the Ottomans got reinforcements. 13 galleys appeared on the horizon, 1,500 elite corsairs, and leading them, a man the Christians called the Scourge of Christendom. His name was Dragut, Turgut race, known to the Christians as Dragut. 80 years old, the most feared corsair in the Mediterranean. For 40 years, Dragut had terrorized Christian coasts. He'd captured 10,000 slaves, sunk 200 ships, raided from Spain to Sicily. He was a legend, a living weapon. The knights hated him. They also respected him. Because Dragut was a genius, a tactical mastermind, and utterly ruthless, even Suleiman the Magnificent feared disappointing him. Suleiman had personally asked Dragut to come to Malta. "Finish this, Dragut. Wipe them out." And Dragut, though 80 years old, though ready to retire, could not refuse his sultan. He arrived on June 2nd with 13 galleys and 1,500 fighters. Suleiman had given him supreme command over Mustafa Pasha, over Piali Pasha. Dragut was in charge, and everything changed. Dragut surveyed Fort Saint Elmo from his ship, looked at the walls, the rubble, the corpses piled around the breaches, the Ottoman bodies rotting in the June heat. He turned to Mustafa Pasha. "You've been attacking this for 10 days?" Mustafa nodded. "Yes, it's nearly fallen. Another few days and—" Dragut cut him off. "You've wasted 10 days and 2,000 men on this?" Mustafa was silent. Dragut made changes immediately. First, cut off the reinforcements. He set up a battery of cannons on a rocky outcrop called Gallows Point. Now those cannons could fire on the swimming messengers. They could also fire on any supply boats trying to reach Saint Elmo. The fort was truly isolated. Second, reposition the artillery. Dragut noticed that de la Valette's counterfire from St. Angelo was hitting some of the Ottoman guns. So Dragut moved the cannons to a lower angle, harder for St. Angelo to hit, more effective at destroying walls. Third, trench warfare. Dragut ordered his engineers to dig approach trenches. Every night they'd dig closer to the fort, slowly, methodically, protected from defensive fire. By the time they reached the walls, they'd be able to storm the fort from point-blank range. This was classic Ottoman siege doctrine, and Dragut was a master. The effect was immediate. Ottoman effectiveness tripled. St. Elmo's casualties spiked. The walls crumbled faster. The situation was deteriorating. On June 9th, the Maltese struck back. A small cavalry force from the inland capital of Mdina raided the Ottoman gun positions at Gallows Point. They killed dozens of gunners, scattered the guards, and allowed one final supply run to reach St. Elmo before the noose tightened. It was a brief respite, but it wouldn't last. June 10th. Dragut ordered a massive assault. 3,000 Janissaries attacked the fort. They stormed the ravelin, the triangular outwork protecting the main walls. Hand-to-hand combat raged for 5 hours. Eventually, the Ottomans were driven back. 400 Ottomans dead. 30 defenders dead. June 15th and 16th. 2 more massive assaults. 4,000 attackers each day. The walls were now almost entirely rubble. The defenders were fighting from piles of broken stone, using pikes, swords, rocks, anything. Both assaults were repelled. A contemporary report from a Spanish soldier recorded, "The Maltese fought with nearly as much bravery as the knights themselves." This is important. This wasn't just knights fighting. This was everyone. Maltese farmers, fishermen, craftsmen, men who had no military training. But they fought anyway, because this was their home, their families, their survival. Class distinctions had been erased in the fire. Knight and peasant fought side by side, bled side by side, died side by side. June 16th, a message arrived at St. Angelo, delivered by a swimmer who nearly died getting it across. The message was from the commander of St. Elmo. It was short. "We have lost 250 men. The walls are completely destroyed. We are fighting from piles of rubble. We need reinforcements, or we need to evacuate. We cannot hold much longer." Jean de la Valette read the message. He stood on the walls of St. Angelo, looking across the harbor at St. Elmo. He could see the constant flashes of cannon fire, the smoke rising, the walls crumbling. One of his officers said, "Grand Master, they cannot hold. We must evacuate them." De la Valette shook his head. "They must hold, as long as possible. But they'll die. Yes, they will die. And in dying, they will save Malta." De la Valette knew what sending reinforcements meant. He'd fought at Rhodes in 1522. He'd watched that fortress fall. He knew how sieges ended. These 200 men he'd send wouldn't save St. Elmo. They would die there. But every day St. Elmo held was a day closer to relief. Every Ottoman dead at St. Elmo was one less attacking the main fortresses later. The math was brutal. But it was clear St. Elmo had to hold, no matter the cost. De la Valette gathered his garrison in the courtyard of St. Angelo, all 600 men, knights, Spanish soldiers, Maltese militia. He spoke. St. Elmo needs 200 men. It is almost certainly a death sentence. I need volunteers. Silence. And then 600 men stepped forward, every single one. Knights, soldiers, Maltese. Everyone wanted to go. De la Valette had to choose 200. Why did they volunteer? Honor, brotherhood, faith, rage at Ottoman atrocities, all of it. But mostly this. They knew their brothers were dying across that harbor, and they would not let them die alone. June 17th, midnight. 200 men swam and rowed across the Grand Harbor to St. Elmo. Ottoman patrol boats were searching. Some of the volunteers were killed in the crossing, but most made it. New garrison total. The fort had started with 450 defenders. After casualties, 200 were still alive, plus the 200 reinforcements. New total, 400 defenders. St. Elmo would hold a little longer, but not much longer. June 17th, 1565. Evening. Dragut was inspecting his artillery positions on Mount Sybaris, the hill overlooking Fort Saint Elmo. He was giving orders to his gun crews. Aim lower, break the base of the walls, collapse them inward. He was standing too close to the forward positions. What happened next depends on which source you read. Version 1, an Ottoman gun fired too early. Friendly fire, a cannonball fragment or a piece of shrapnel hit Dragut in the head. Version 2, a lucky shot from St. Angelo. De la Valette's gunners, firing from across the harbor, hit a rock near Dragut. A splinter of stone struck him in the temple. Either way, the result was the same. Dragut fell. Severe head trauma, skull fractured, unconscious immediately. He was carried to his tent. The Ottoman commanders tried to hide the injury. They spread rumors that Dragut was just resting, exhausted from the campaign. But the soldiers knew. Whispers spread through the camp. Dragut is dying. He lingered for 6 days, in and out of consciousness, delirious, dying slowly. The morale impact was catastrophic. Dragut was the Ottomans' best commander, their greatest tactician, and now he was dying, and they still hadn't taken one small fort. But Mustafa Pasha couldn't stop. He had to keep attacking. Suleiman would execute him if he failed. So the assaults continued. The cannons kept firing. The men kept dying. June 18th, 1565. During one of the assaults, several knights were captured alive, wounded, overwhelmed, taken to the Ottoman camp. Mustafa Pasha ordered them brought before him. He wanted to make an example. The knights were beheaded publicly. Their bodies were mutilated. Some sources say their hearts were cut out. Their corpses were nailed to wooden crosses, and those crosses were set adrift across the Grand Harbor, toward Birgu, toward Jean de la Valette. The message was clear. This is what awaits you. De la Valette stood on the walls of St. Angelo. He watched the crosses float across the water, bodies of his knights nailed to them, heads displayed, blood in the water. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he turned to his officers. "Bring me every Turkish prisoner we hold." There were about 50 Ottoman prisoners in St. Angelo, captured during earlier skirmishes. They were being held in the dungeons. De la Valette's order was simple. Execute them, all of them. His officers hesitated. "Grand Master, if we kill prisoners, the Ottomans will... They already have. Bring them up." The Ottoman prisoners were dragged into the courtyard. They were beheaded. Their bodies were dismembered. And then de la Valette gave an order that shocked even his own men. "Load the bodies into our cannons. Aim at the Ottoman lines. Fire." The cannons were loaded with pieces of Ottoman corpses and fired across the harbor, toward the Ottoman camp. The message was equally clear. No quarter, no mercy, only death. Why did de la Valette do this? Several reasons. First, to show the Ottomans he would not be intimidated. You send us corpses, we send yours back, in pieces from cannons. Second, to rally his own men. See, we fight back. We're not victims, we're warriors. Third, to eliminate prisoners. During a siege, you can't feed prisoners. They consume resources you need for your own men. And fourth, to make it clear that this siege had become total war. No prisoners, no negotiations. Fight to extermination. Some historians doubt this story. There are no eyewitness accounts that definitively confirm it, but multiple sources mention it. And whether it happened or not, it became legend. And legends shape morale. From that moment on, both sides understood. This was a fight to the death. The Ottoman soldiers who witnessed de la Valette's response were horrified. Not by the violence. They'd seen worse. But by what it meant. These Christians would not surrender, would not negotiate, would not break. They would fight to extermination. And that meant the Ottomans would have to kill every single one, all 6,000 defenders across Malta. Man, woman, child. The siege had become genocide. The escalation continued. Over the next few days, no prisoners were taken by either side. Wounded men were killed where they lay. Surrendering was pointless. Both sides knew. You fight until you die. There's no other option. June 18th, 1565. The Ottomans captured the Ravelin, the triangular defensive outwork that had protected St. Elmo's main walls for 3 weeks. After dozens of assaults, hundreds of dead janissaries, the Ravelin finally fell. The Ottomans held it, and they wouldn't give it back. This was catastrophic for the defenders. The Ravelin had been their last major defensive position. Now the Ottomans could build siege bridges directly to the walls. They did exactly that. Using masts from their galleys, they lashed together wooden bridges over the fort's ditch. Now they could walk directly to the walls. No more charging across open ground. No more getting shot down in the breach. June 19th through 21st, the Ottomans moved cannons onto the Ravelin itself. Now they were firing from 50 paces away. Point-blank range. The walls disintegrated. Inside St. Elmo, maybe 150 defenders were still alive. Out of 400, they were exhausted, starving, wounded. Many were too injured to stand, but they were still fighting. June 22nd, 1565, the last night. The defenders knew it was over. The walls were completely gone. They were fighting from piles of rubble. They had almost no gunpowder left, almost no food or water. They knew tomorrow was the end. So they prepared. First, confessions. The fort's chaplain moved through the ruins, hearing final confessions. Every man confessed his sins, received last rites, took communion, the body and blood of Christ, because they knew some of them would be dead before the sun set, and they needed to be in a state of grace. Second, letters home. Some of the defenders wrote final letters, gave them to the few remaining swimmers, hoping they'd reach St. Angelo. Farewells to families they'd never see again. We died well. Tell my mother I love her. Pray for us. Third, preparations for the final battle. The knights who were too wounded to walk had themselves propped up in chairs. They positioned the chairs in the breaches, sat with swords across their laps. If they couldn't stand, they'd die sitting. And fourth, the last prayer. All the defenders gathered in what remained of the chapel of St. Anne. The roof was gone, the walls were half collapsed, but the altar still stood. And the cross. They knelt together. 150 men, knights in battered armor, Spanish soldiers with bloody bandages, Maltese fishermen holding broken pikes, and they prayed the rosary one last time. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Their voices echoed in the ruins, quiet, steady, unafraid. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. When the prayer ended, they looked at each other. No words needed. They all understood. No surrender, no retreat. Fight until every man is dead. Make the Ottomans pay for every foot. A Spanish soldier who swam away before the final day later wrote, "They knew they would die, but they were at peace. They had done their duty. God would receive them." June 23rd, 1565. Dawn, 4 in the morning, the Ottoman army assembled. 8,000 troops, every elite unit, Janissaries, Sipahi cavalry, corsairs, no reserves held back. This was everything. Mustafa Pasha gave the order. Take St. Elmo. No mercy. 4:30 in the morning. The bombardment began. Every Ottoman cannon fired. 30 minutes of continuous hell. The fort disappeared in smoke and dust. The sound was deafening. The earth shook. When the smoke cleared, the walls were completely gone. Just piles of rubble, bodies, debris. The Ottomans charged. 8,000 men, war cries echoing. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Swords drawn, muskets loaded, victory certain. No resistance from the walls. Because there were no walls, they poured through the breaches like flood water. Then the gunfire started, from piles of rubble, from ruined buildings, from holes in the ground. The Christians were still there, still fighting, still alive. The battle became a brawl, 6 hours of continuous close combat. No room for guns. This was swords, daggers, fists, teeth, men grappling in the rubble, stabbing, choking, dying. Blood everywhere. Bodies piled on bodies. The Ottomans kept coming, wave after wave, and the defenders kept killing them. But there were only 150 Christians and 8,000 Ottomans. Slowly, inevitably, the defenders were pushed back, killed one by one, fighting to the last breath. The last 10 defenders retreated to the chapel of St. Anne. Knights, Spanish soldiers, Maltese. They barricaded the door. The Ottomans broke through. All 10 were killed, fighting at the altar. The last man died with his back against the cross. Still standing, sword in hand, 8 o'clock in the morning, Fort Saint Elmo fell. The Ottoman flag was raised over the ruins. 5 to 9 men escaped by swimming. Sources vary. They reached St. Angelo, told the story. Everyone else was dead. In his tent, Dragut regained consciousness one final time. He'd been in and out for 6 days. His officers gathered. He whispered, "St. Elmo?" "Taken, sir. It fell this morning." Dragut tried to smile, couldn't. He whispered his final words. Historical sources record them as, "If the child cost this much, what price the mother?" The child was St. Elmo, the small fort. The mother was Birgu and Senglea, the main fortresses. And then Dragut died. After 40 years of fighting the knights, he died thinking he'd won. He never knew what his victory had cost. June 23rd, 1565. Noon. Mustafa Pasha walked through the ruins of Fort Saint Elmo. Bodies everywhere. Thousands of corpses. Most of them Ottoman. 8,000 Ottoman soldiers dead, rotting in the June heat. The stench was unbearable. He looked across the Grand Harbor, at Birgu, at Senglea, the main fortresses, 10 times larger than St. Elmo. Walls intact, fully manned, waiting. He repeated Dragut's dying words. "What will the Father cost us when the Son cost us so dear?" The Ottoman High Command held an emergency council. The numbers were catastrophic. They'd started with 40,000 soldiers. In 31 days, 8,000 to 9,000 were dead. 22% of their entire army. Gone. For one small fort. 2 football fields of rock. The Janissary Corps, the Sultan's elite infantry, was decimated. They'd started with 6,300 Janissaries. 3,000 were now dead. Half. Gone. Morale was shattered. The Ottomans had expected a quick victory. Maybe a week. Instead, they'd gotten a month-long bloodbath. The soldiers were whispering, "Can we even take this island?" And strategically, time was running out. Dragut was dead. The best commander the Ottomans had. Summer heat was setting in. Disease was spreading. The Christian relief force was getting closer. But they couldn't retreat. Suleiman the Magnificent would execute them if they failed. They had to continue. Turn the full force of the army on the main fortresses. To put this in perspective, the Battle of Agincourt in 1415 killed 6,000 French soldiers. The Battle of Towton in 1461 had 28,000 total casualties across both sides. Fort Saint Elmo, in 31 days, killed 8,000 to 9,000 men. More men died taking Saint Elmo than died at Agincourt. In 31 days, for 2 football fields of rock. That's the scale of what happened here. June 24th, 1565. The Ottoman army began moving their cannons, 70 siege guns, the largest concentration of artillery the Mediterranean had ever seen. They positioned them on the heights overlooking Birgu and Senglea. The barrels were aimed at the cities, at the walls, at the buildings, at the people inside. And this time, it wouldn't just be soldiers dying. This time, it would be women, children, the entire Maltese people. St. Elmo had fallen, but the siege everyone expected to last 1 month had only begun. 8,000 Ottomans lay dead. Dragut, the greatest Ottoman admiral in history, was gone. The Janissaries, the Sultan's elite, were decimated. But 30,000 Ottoman soldiers remained. And now, with the small fort taken, they would turn their full fury on the main fortresses. Birgu, Senglea, where 6,000 Christians waited. Jean de la Valette had bought his 31 days. The relief force from Sicily was 60 days away. Could Malta survive 60 more days of what Saint Elmo endured? The Ottomans moved their cannons, 70 siege guns, now aimed at the cities. The largest bombardment in Ottoman history was about to begin. And among the defenders standing on the walls of Birgu, watching those cannons aim, were 4,000 women and children. Mothers, daughters, sons too young to fight. They had nowhere to run. The island was surrounded. The Ottoman fleet controlled the sea. If Birgu fell, the Ottomans would slaughter them all. Malta wasn't just fighting for Christendom anymore. Malta was fighting for survival. June 24th, 1565. Dawn. The Ottoman cannons opened fire. The slaughter at St. Elmo was over. The slaughter of Malta had just begun.